Have you ever imagined that there's an invisible thread inside you, capable of linking your mind to your soul and completely transforming your inner reality? This thread has a name: the vagus nerve. More than a mere bodily structure, it is a sacred channel of spiritual reconnection, overlooked by science for centuries, yet revered by ancient traditions as the gateway to awakening consciousness. In this video, you will discover that spirituality isn't something remote or reserved for monks and gurus. It lives within you and can be accessed through breath, sound, touch, and presence. Get ready to explore a forgotten territory, the living temple of your body, where peace, healing, and intuition await their emergence. Now write in the comments, "I activate my inner peace with every breath." This is your first step to opening the doors of the sacred that dwell within you. Jacobo Grinberg was a visionary neuroscientist who dared to cross the boundaries between science, spirituality, and perception. Unlike conventional researchers, he believed that the reality we experience isn't an immutable external truth, but a construction shaped by the mind. According to his neuronal field theory, everything we see, feel, and live is a direct result of our perceptual framework, and that framework can be altered by practices that shift our state of consciousness. Grinberg spent years studying Mesoamerican spiritual traditions among shamans and Mexican healers, and noticed that many of these ancestral practices activated profound states of perception and healing. The common thread? All of them involved elements we now know stimulate the vagus nerve. Stay until the end, and I'll reveal the best practices. For Grinberg, authentic spirituality wasn't a belief, but a perceptual adjustment. And that is precisely what the vagus nerve enables. It not only regulates physiological functions, but acts as a living bridge between body and spirit, opening the doors to an expanded state of consciousness. In this video, we will explore how to activate this bridge and how it can transform your spiritual health. For centuries, spirituality has been portrayed as something outside the body, a lofty, etheric quest, disconnected from matter. However, the oldest spiritual traditions knew what modern science is only beginning to understand. The body is not an obstacle to enlightenment, but the path to it. And within that body lies a subtle, profound structure essential to the journey: the vagus nerve. This nerve, known as the 10th cranial nerve, winds its way through nearly every part of our being, from the brain to the throat, through the heart, lungs, stomach, and intestines. Its name comes from the Latin vagus, meaning wandering, in reference to its winding, far-reaching route. But more than a physiological messenger, the vagus nerve is, in spiritual terms, a living bridge between the material world and the field of consciousness. Jacobo Grinberg, who dedicated his life to investigating the intersections of brain, perception, and spirit, argued that reality is generated internally. He proposed the existence of the neuronal field, an invisible matrix that connects all forms of life and shapes what we call reality. When the structure of this field is modified, our perception expands. That's where the vagus nerve takes center stage. When activated by practices such as deep breathing, meditative silence, or intentional chanting, the vagus nerve induces the body into a parasympathetic state, a state of rest, regeneration, and spiritual receptivity. This state quiets the ego, stills the restless mind, and allows perception to become more sensitive to the subtle layers of reality. In other words, the vagus nerve helps dissolve the boundaries that separate the I from the all. In Taoist traditions, this connection was described as a channel of vital energy uniting heaven and earth within the human body. To the ancient Egyptians, it was the flow of the Ka, the life force coursing between heart and womb. And in Hebrew teachings, God's breath, the Ruach, was the organizing principle of life, accessible through conscious breathing. All these archetypes point to the same truth. There is a sacred line within us, simultaneously biological, energetic and spiritual. By understanding the vagus nerve, not merely as an anatomical component, but as an embodied spiritual antenna, we completely change how we relate to the body. It ceases to be a vessel that carries the soul and becomes instead the temple in which the soul reveals itself. When we care for this channel, we strengthen the bridge between our human identity and our spiritual essence. It is through its activation that inner peace, intuitive clarity, and the sense of unity emerge, not as distant mystical experiences, but as our natural states of being. If the vagus nerve is the bridge between body and spirit, then breath, sound, and silence are the keys that unlock it. The secret does not lie in grand gestures, but in the presence with which we live the simple. Ancient practices always knew this. The sacred reveals itself in the everyday, and spiritual elevation begins when we breathe consciously, vibrate with intention, and fall silent with reverence. Conscious breathing, especially deep diaphragmatic breathing, is one of the most effective ways to activate the vagus nerve. By inhaling slowly and deeply through the nose and exhaling in a controlled way through the mouth, we send a direct message to the body. You are safe. This state of safety deactivates the sympathetic alarm system and engages the regenerating parasympathetic mode, where the vagus nerve shines. According to Jacobo Grinberg, this restful state is also the tipping point of consciousness, the moment when perception begins to expand beyond its ordinary limits. But breathing goes beyond physiology. It is a spiritual tool. In Hebrew, the word ruach means both spirit and breath. In Eastern traditions, prana or chi is the vital energy carried by the air. When we breathe with intention, we are literally moving consciousness through the body. That is why Buddhist monks, yoga masters, and mystics of many cultures always begin their rituals with breath. They knew it was through breathing that one contacts the divine. Sound, meanwhile, acts as a natural vibrator of the vagus nerve. This nerve has endings in the throat, the palate, and the inner ears. That means mantras, chants, and even rhythmic affirmations directly stimulate this channel. The famous mantra Om, for example, not only symbolizes creation, but resonates at frequencies that soothe the nervous system. Chanting with presence generates a vibration that travels through the body, releases tension, and tunes the energy to a state of harmony. And finally, silence. Not the absence of sound, but inner silence. The stillness that arises when we stop reacting, stop overthinking, and simply are. Unit. It is in this fertile void that the vagus nerve expands. Brain waves slow down and the body tunes in to the greater field of consciousness. Grinberg claimed that silence is one of the most direct means of reorganizing the neuronal field because it suspends repetitive mental patterns and allows new perceptions to settle. By combining breath, sound, and silence, we create an ideal inner environment for awakening. A calm body, a quiet mind, and a clear vibrational field are the perfect conditions for the soul to manifest. These techniques don't just regulate the body, they purify the path to higher consciousness. Many people seek spiritual growth by trying to escape emotions, as if feelings were obstacles on the path to the light. Yet the deepest teachings show the exact opposite. It is through emotions that the soul speaks, and through the body that it manifests. In this context, the vagus nerve acts as a sensitive instrument of vibrational transduction, detecting, processing, and integrating emotions, insights, and expanded states of consciousness. Jacobo Grinberg asserted that the reality we perceive is determined by mental structures formed by past emotional and perceptual experiences. When these structures are crystallized in fear, tension, or trauma, they limit our access to the broader field of consciousness. The vagus nerve, when correctly activated, has the power to dissolve these crystallizations, releasing the flow of psychic energy and restoring contact with finer dimensions of being. Continued activation of the vagus nerve lowers cortisol levels, the stress hormone, and raises oxytocin production, known as the love hormone. This biochemical balance not only promotes physical health, but transforms the individual's energy field, making it more stable, coherent, and receptive. Spiritually translated, this means the body enters a vibrational state in which intuition is clearer, synchronicities are noticed, and even memories beyond linear time can surface. When the body calms and the vagus nerve is stimulated through breath, sound, or conscious touch, a subtle phenomenon occurs. The egoic mind loses its grip, and the inner space expands. It is in this full void that intuitions emerge like flashes of truth, ideas, images, responses, or sensations, not born of logical reasoning, but of a deeper intelligence, the one that inhabits the unified field Grinberg described as the matrix of reality. Moreover, in elevated vagal states, spontaneous mystical experiences often arise: lucid dreams, feelings of unity with the all, symbolic visions, emotional catharsis, or healing insights. These are not hallucinations, but manifestations of consciousness on a plane where the ego's veil thins. That is why regular practices that activate the vagus nerve are also a way to safely, organically, and integrally tune into the spiritual field. In this process, emotions cease to be barriers and become bridges. Sadness, when held with compassion, leads to surrender. Anger, when heard without judgment, reveals where the soul calls for justice. Anxiety, when breathed, transforms into mindfulness. In every one of these moments, it is the vagus nerve that translates chaos into clarity. A clarity that does not come from rational thought, but from the deep vibration of the healing, awakening self. True spirituality does not reveal itself in extraordinary moments, but in how we inhabit the ordinary. It is not enough to know that the vagus nerve is a sacred channel between body and soul. We must turn that knowledge into daily practice. Caring for this invisible thread can become a ritual, a way of living with presence, connecting the physical to the eternal in every gesture, in every breath. Jacobo Grinberg said that the mind, by perceiving repetitive patterns, creates structure. Therefore, the conscious repetition of small practices has the power to restructure the neuronal field, opening space for new reality perceptions. When these practices involve body, sound, touch, and breath, the vagus nerve is activated and becomes the vehicle of transformation. Spirituality ceases to be a concept and becomes an embodied experience. The first practice is ritualized breathing upon waking. Before checking your phone or getting out of bed, sit with your spine straight. Place your hands on your abdomen. Inhale through your nose to a count of 4. Hold for 2 seconds, then exhale through your mouth to a count of 6. Do this for 5 minutes with attention and intention. Imagine that with each inhale, life energy flows in. With each exhale, tension dissolves. Over time, this simple act becomes a silent prayer. The second practice is conscious use of your voice. Chant a mantra, a power phrase, or even a single word such as peace, love, or presence. The vocal vibration resonates in the body, stimulating vagal receptors in the throat and inner ears. You can do this while showering, walking, or cooking. You don't need to sing well. The key is to vibrate with presence, as if each sound were an invitation to the soul. The third practice is intentional touch. At the end of the day, gently massage the areas where the vagus nerve is most accessible. The base of the skull, the neck near the carotid, the heart and the abdomen. As you touch these zones, give thanks to your body. Acknowledge it as a temple. Mentally say, "Here dwells the sacred." Conscious touch not only stimulates the vagus nerve, but also reconnects mind and body with love and reverence. The fourth practice is presence in nature and silence. Walking barefoot on the earth, sitting under a tree, or quietly listening to the wind naturally regulates your nervous system. You don't have to think, just be. Nature has a stable vibrational field, and when you surrender to it with attention, your vagus nerve aligns with its rhythm, anchoring peace, centeredness, and clarity. These practices are simple but far from trivial. When carried out with consistency and intention, they become sacred acts, You don't need to change your life to spiritualize it. You need to spiritualize the way you live your life, and the vagus nerve will be your silent guide on this journey back to the center. You don't have to climb mountains, follow distant masters, or abandon your current life to awaken your spirituality. Everything you seek already resides in your body, waiting only for your remembrance. The vagus nerve is that living reminder, a silent channel between matter and spirit, between anxiety and peace, between the clamor of the world and the wisdom of the soul. Now that you understand the hidden power of this sacred structure, the next step is to act. Choose one of the practices shared here: conscious breathing, sound, touch, silence, or contact with nature, and turn it into a daily ritual. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Begin with what you have, where you are, with what you feel. Consistency will be your key. Subscribe to the channel to keep receiving content that unites science, spirituality, and practice in an accessible, transformative way. Share this video with someone who needs to find their center, and in the comments write, "I awaken the sacred in me with every breath." This simple phrase is more than a gesture. It is a commitment to your own light. Remember, the temple already exists within you. Now it's time to inhabit it.